All right, so I love Dave's talk and talking about machine learning. I'd like to ask the audience, who here uses machine learning on a daily basis? Raise your hand. All right, 5 people. Who here uses Waze and Google Maps on a daily basis? Hands up. You all use machine learning, okay? So because it learns the tracks and basically figures out the best path. So that's for you to know. Who here works in HR? That was more of a do you understand me question. Who here works in HR? And who here uses data on a daily basis in HR? About a third. That's higher than I expected. Nice. And who here uses HR from on a time basis? Who here analyzes anything around time of their people? Okay, 10 people. That's probably timesheets, I'm going to assume. So my talk's about productivity and a journey about productivity around what we've been up to at Time is Limited. And so let me get to it. My background, and I spoke here 9 years ago when my company was when my previous company was sort of barely getting started. And I built a company together with my co-founders and buddies from 4 people up to over 400 people at the end of the day. And it was amazing to watch that. But at a certain point in time, when the team reached over 150 people, I stopped being able to understand the heartbeat and the culture of the company. And I stopped being to understand is why are my people spending time in the way they do? Why are they sending emails? And why are they communicating in the way they do? And we were a digital native company. And so it shouldn't have been a problem to understand all of that. But I didn't have the access to data and to information. And I would like to share to you today also why not to be scared of data in the HR space. So what is productivity? Many people, if you Google top productivity tips, you get personal productivity. And if you want to and talk to me later, I've got a ton of those. I do workflows in my own sort of way. I try and work really everywhere, and I try and watch TV shows at twice the speed and many other things. So it's more energy management at a personal level. But that's not the productivity that we are talking about when managing a company. When we're managing a company, even if one person is the most productive of all, it's only a part of a social network of a company, especially in large companies. It's part of a chain. So if you want to change behaviors, if you want to teach people how to behave, you also have to understand the patterns, the communication, and behind them, of course, is data. And today, internal communication inside companies is a mess. It's a mess for a number of reasons. I mean, we've heard the presentations around remote working, around co-working, around being on digital calls, all of that. You guys know all of that. But what is this creating? Do we really know the impact that these changes have? Are they correct changes? And if not, can we course correct fast enough, and can we find out fast enough? And I think the answer to a lot of these questions is just we don't know. And a lot of the times I hear HR leaders of big companies or CEOs or COOs telling me, well, actually, I think, this. But I'm like, well, that's a feeling. That's your gut feeling. That's great. You have to have one. Show me the data. So, what does this create at the people level? Well, they are all overwhelmed. They don't really have time to do their work. They're not productive. And of course, they're frustrated. This creates a lot of frustration with people. And I'll get to specific examples in a bit on what frustrates them. One of the biggest frustrations of this generation is something we call, it's a disease really, it's called meetingitis. All right? It's so bad, many of us have it. We just go from meetings to meetings, and sometimes we sit there and we're like, should I really be here? And it's like, okay, maybe not. But sometimes we lack the will to just get up We lack the will to just decline the meeting when the invite comes. Maybe it's from our boss. Maybe it's from a colleague we like and we don't want to offend them. But I'm saying, decline meetings to your boss. Offend your colleagues. It's your time that you are protecting. You're spending a majority of time, in your workplace. So if you manage it incorrectly, especially you as HR people, you're not setting a great example for the rest of them. Managers, this is a Harvard Business Review statistic, 71% of meetings are unproductive or inefficient. These people did not have to be there. We see companies these days with average amount of people at a meeting, average 10, 20 people in a meeting, average. Now, what is the cost of this? Maybe a manager says, I'm just doing one weekly meeting and some meetings around it. I'm not wasting too much time of my people. All right, let's look at a weekly management meeting. How does this look like? So one group of 5, 10, 15 managers meet on a weekly basis. But their people meet to prepare. That's 20,000 hours a year. And those people meet to prepare. That's 63,000 hours a year. And when you get to the prep meetings of those team and unit meetings, you get to a total bill of 210,000 hours per year of one innocent weekly meeting. One weekly meeting. Now that really makes you consider, should we have it? Is it necessary? How to structure the flow of information and time. And all of this is supposedly supported by what's called a digital workplace. All online meetings, all collaboration. So, okay, we're all in the cloud. Office 365, calendars, everything is synchronizing. Okay, that's a basic. But now we have Microsoft Teams and Slack and Facebook Workplace and WebEx and Yammer and all of this. And all of those traditional tools, like Salesforce and most of the other things, they're becoming more and more social, which means they're starting to interact with each other. You can now write in Slack a query for Salesforce and all of this. Now, do we think this is really helping? Or can it even be, distracting for my teams? I asked a big drinks company the other day, and it wasn't Pepsi. And they said, last week, we just deployed Microsoft Teams on our entire company. I'm like, wow, this is great. And we modeled it after Microsoft's own deployment. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And do you think it is a good deployment? They said, no. Like, okay, well, why'd you model it against their deployment? Because it's the best we have. Because we actually know very little about what all of these collaboration tools will do at massive scale. Now, that's not to say, okay, let's not use collaboration tools. This is a really bad idea. No, we have to. But we also have to learn from the data what it means. So, just some tips, because I really don't want you to get out with no tips around these tools. If you're setting up these tools, write those things down. Make sure the setup is proper, not too little groups, too many groups. We've seen a company with 1,000 people that had 2,500 channels on Slack. That's probably not great. Make sure they're the right ones, correct ones. We've heard the talk about tribes, or in other ways they're called sort of channels in companies. Yes, so there's an official org, and there might be a certain work org. Definitely have groups for that. But once in a while, declutter and reorganize it. Make sure you can delete some of those working groups. And what I always recommend, we are over-notified society. We get 1,100 notifications a day on average as people. Go to your iPhone, check how many you get, right? In your screen time settings, there's a nice little section. Some people even more. So we have to sometimes figure out, okay, I need to focus. I need to turn those off. So there's a term that's being put in the HR leaders more and more. It's called people analytics. I do not like the naming of it, because from my point of view, it implies, I'm checking someone's browsing history, I'm logging what he does in each software. No, I don't think any company should be doing this anymore. I don't think you should be tracking people's website histories. And if you will, people, the young generation won't want to work for you. And also, it's not very ethical. So we think there's a right way of doing this people analytics. And we also think there's a wrong way. We also think the people analytics belongs under HR, deeply, for obvious reasons. One, it's really the only place that can handle this sensitive data. And two, there's a lot of ethical, legal, and other questions that, again, only HR is really, addressed to, okay to address. Now, does that mean you will all have to become data analysts? No. You can convert your learning and development people into this. You can educate people inside. So there's a right way of doing people analytics, and it's using the signals that are already there. We sometimes call it internally public data. In companies, Slack is shared. Calendars are usually shared among the entire company. Using signals that exist from these systems, from a CRM platform or others, to determine what type of actions can be seen as productive or not. And we do not mean you analyzing large spreadsheets of data. Of course not. We mean analyzing the patterns, but looking at it from a perspective of relationships. So to give you an example, this is a SocioMap, one of the things that my co-founder has invented, and basically it looks at relationship data between teams. So immediately, you can look at how are my people communicating on the new communication channels versus how are they meeting, for example. Or you can look over time, how has the communication evolved at my company. This we can do in a day for a company of 100,000 people. No problem. You process the HR org chart, you process calendars, you have this data right there available. Now, we've also done things like sentiment analysis from this data. I'm sure people love filling out these employee engagement surveys. But sometimes, we tend to want them too much as HR people. But you can see the signals of happiness already in this data. Now, IT and HR. So does this mean you have to start also being IT people because you will need their help? So actually, the smartest companies that I've seen merged their HR and IT teams. Why? Because today, IT isn't anymore this, security, this IT, let the hardware part of IT be on the side. Let there be some cloud people, but real IT should be how are people using what we give them, which is an HR thing to do. Don't fight your IT teams. Work with them together on this. And try and invent a way how to be able to take this. Because all of this data, 5 years ago, it would have taken a 1-year IT project. Today, if you set up the security and privacy correctly, you can take data from each of these platforms with 1 click and 5 seconds of IT time. If your IT is telling you something different, maybe reconsider that IT team. Fire them, just plain point blank. You're HR, you can do that, right? Okay. So, what have we learned as a company so far? And we're in this for the last 2.5 years, trying to really learn and understand this data. And we are at the beginning of this journey. We think there's a lot more where that came from. But we've learned that especially managers really lack, and middle managers, really lack focus time. What does that mean? They have meetingitis. They do, on average, 120 hours of meetings on a monthly basis, and they have no free time. I look at some of these, companies, and these managers, on average, I really figure out, when are they eating? When are they doing follow-ups to these meetings? On the other meetings? So, but this is not only about managers. We have a client who has a 700-person engineering team, and their average amount of monthly meetings went up from 20 to 40. That's that's 20 times 750. That's a lot of hours. That's thousands and thousands of hours every month of their engineering team in meetings. That's tens of thousands of hours on a yearly basis. We're talking manned years of time, millions of dollars, if you look at it from a money and a dollar angle. Now, they didn't like that, so they were trying to figure out how to reduce the amount of meetings and overhead put on these people because they needed to focus. It's also how you organize those meetings, when you organize them. Usually, they're being organized around the managers. We think meetings should be organized around the people, around the teams, around their day, around their workflow, not in the way they used to be organized. Now, you can think as these Microsoft Teams and collaboration tools and Slack, are they a friend or are they a foe? Well, they're definitely not going away. You need to use them. You need to adopt these types of platforms. If your company doesn't already think of how to adopt these, then the other companies might be faster and communicating better. But also figure out how you use them and how you could be leveraging them better. Think really of the design, as I mentioned. And again, over-notification and over-usage can be a big problem here. So we have a client whose teams send or engage with messages on one of these platforms every 3 to 7 minutes. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're coding or doing some work, and every 3 to 7 minutes you swap to communicating, that's not very productive. One of the things that concerned me at my company was the sales team, right? Sales team is critical for every company. So what I liked looking at was what percentage of time does my sales team spend not doing sales? So I looked and aggregated the amount of time they spent outside the business and inside the business. And then I looked on the internal time, is it time being spent with the sales guys? Is it time being spent with marketing or with learning, education? Where is their time being taken away? Because that's time being taken away from the field. And I also figured out what was really weird. The more time these people spend in the field, the more internal overhead this created, regardless if they went after small, medium-sized, or very large accounts. So this is very important to look at. And again, understanding the structure of time should be critical for every company. Stop the meeting madness and making sure that you're really meeting in the right way. And one of the ways to do it, we've heard tribes and agile, and there's a whole panel about agile later today. Through this data, we have learned to understand what is the difference really in terms of time spent of the before and after. We worked with a massive bank, 8,000 people in the region in Central Europe, to look at, is their agile transformation going as expected? They were moving thousands of people and are moving thousands of people into agile. And we were able to find metrics that they can identify month by month how it's going. So to conclude, our vision of the future, some people saw this movie and laughed, is not the movie that you die if the time runs out, which essentially it will for all of us one day. We'll see. But point is, we're all coming to a future where we're going to have to use time-based data in the workplace. We're going to have to understand using communication data in the workplace much more than we have today. So I hope that when we meet again, maybe next year, or we meet on another meeting, we'll talk about, okay, how do I leverage this? Of course, you'll be able to talk to me outside. I'll be here all day. So, and please do. So, and I didn't say a lot about what we do as a company, but I think there were a lot of examples of that already. So we're a time analytics company. We look at and aggregate all of that data that was already mentioned and try and visualize it for the company. We're working with pilots now. We sit down with the company and say, okay, let's look at all this data, put it together, and see what we can see and see what we can do about it. So thank you very much.